What up, AP World family? All right, so by request, I'm going to break down the short answer question format real deep, dig into it, and then I'm going to pretend to be a student and actually go through and model one part of the short answer response to hopefully try to give you guys an insight. But first, I want to talk about the important format issues, right? So if you go into this with enough knowledge to know what you're being asked to do, I think the task just becomes increasingly more easy. So when we get to a short answer question, a couple things that I would encourage you to keep in mind. One, I go into it thinking of the number 13, right? 13 is about the time you have to read and construct your response for a short answer. Okay, now I've already timed it out. I read through this and the questions, and it took me about 43 seconds to read both the stimuli and the questions. All right, so that would leave you about 12 minutes ish to go through and write your response. All right, so that's kind of where it would be at. Now, all short answers are worth 3 points. Right? Usually, if you look at this one, right, I have A, B, and C. Sometimes they only have A and B, but A might be worth 2 points, and then B will be worth 1. They're always worth 3 points. Okay, the average score on a short answer is usually around 1 out of the 3 points. That's about the average score. So when I hear that, what that tells me is when you go into these, you don't have to be perfect. Right? Don't think about it as, oh, if I get a 2 out of 3, I'm screwed here. Quite the opposite. If I look at A, B, and C, and one of those is just an absolute stinker, then just don't worry about it, right? Put your time and efforts into the 2 that you really like. And if you only get 2 points, 2 out of 3 is probably still going to be better than the average. And so you're still coming out ahead, right? So there you're hedging your bets that those 2 are going to earn you points, and that crappy one, you're just going to ship it off because really, why waste your time on one that you don't think you can get? And so we're hedging on that. You're always going to write in paragraphs, complete sentences, right? This even says using complete sentences. So what I would do is A, and then blah, 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 B, blah, 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 C, right? So you're going to have like 3 paragraphs, a total, a maximum page limit. Okay, so that's kind of where it fits in. Now, some of them will have a stimuli. The one that I picked for us today has a stimuli. Could be writing, it could be pictures. Sometimes they don't have a stimuli. Sometimes it's just A, B, and C, and away you go. Okay, and so that's kind of the general format. So we're going to stop this phase, and then we're going to actually go through and practice this specific prompt here. All right, so I just want to clarify what we're about to do here. So I am going to go through this actual AP short answer prompt. I'm going to go through the questions. I also just want to make sure that we understand there's a little confusion. On the actual test, they do not give you any sort of graphic organizers or planning tools. It's just going to be a blank space down there. Okay, so you could, by choice, write out some thoughts, do a little brainstorming. Especially if we're doing this on paper with a pen. Feel free to write on there. If this is a digital one, there's just going to be nothing, right? You just can't do anything there. And instead, they're going to give you like a page and you write. And so then this is how I would set it up: A, space, B, I write my stuff, C, I write my thing. All right, but again, they'll give you just one page, and then you just write until you've either filled up the page and you can go no further, right, or you're running out of time. You move to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to actually read through this, and I apologize that I'm reading to you, but I think it will kind of help us fit through this. So I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to think out loud and kind of work my way through it. It's unfair to me because reading out loud is way slower. Like I said, reading inside my head, it took me 43 seconds. Reading this out loud, it's going to take much longer. Okay, and then after this, we'll move into the planning phase. Now, if I were actually writing this, I wouldn't probably spend the time to write much for planning. For a DBQ essay, you betcha. I would be writing out some columns, and I'd be picking my documents and figuring out which ones I want to do source analysis. For short answer, I just don't think, honestly, I'd have time. I want to have as much time as I can to write and then keep moving on. Okay, so here we go. Let's see how quickly I can get through the reading of the prompt and the questions. All right, so here we go. Moroccan historian Ibn Khaldun wrote about the Black Plague outbreak this way. Civilizations both in the East and West was visited by a destructive plague which devastated nations and caused populations to vanish. It swallowed up many of the good things of civilization and wiped them out. Civilizations decreased with the decrease of mankind. Cities and buildings were laid waste, roads and way signs were obliterated, settlements and mansions became empty, dynasties and tribes grew weak. The entire world changed. Okay? In the Travels of Ibn Battuta, the great traveler noted that as of 1345, the number that died daily in Damascus had been 2,000. But the people were able to defeat the plague through prayer. And lastly, an Italian author, Gabriele Dumicis, recorded the whole army was affected by a disease which overran the Tartars and killed thousands upon thousands every day. He claimed that the Mongol leader ordered corpses to be placed in catapults and lobbed into the city in hopes that the intolerable stench would kill everyone inside. Okay, so we actually know a couple of these. We've heard them or read them already. So here's my topics, my questions. Remember, all three of them, these are all three make up just one short answer question. Explain one pattern the excerpts show about the Black Death. Explain one way that the Black Death spread during the period 1200 to 1450, and explain one way that the environment or sedentary civilizations impacted the spread of the Black Death. All right, so how long did that take? All right, wow. Honestly, arguably, that was like some of the slowest reading I've ever done. I talk fast, but that was pretty poor. I'm sorry. So when I did it inside my head, remember it was about 45 seconds. Reading it out loud, it took me a minute and 40 seconds, so much slower. So if I use my honest timing, I have probably about 2 minutes still left to do a little planning. If I use my slow man's timing, I've got like a minute and 10 seconds, which not as good. Okay, so now what I want to do, I've read it. I'm going to look at the questions. Now, truthfully, when I look at these questions, like I said, I really probably wouldn't write down a big, long-winded planning. I'm just going to kind of go with what's in my mind and run with it. And so quite simply, I look at A and it says, explain one pattern the excerpts show about the Black Death. All three of them show the pattern of catastrophic loss, right? The magnitude of death, right? So it talks about vanishing, the decrease of mankind. The second one talks about thousands, 2,000 people died. The last one talks about thousands upon thousands. So I just talk about the sheer magnitude of death, right? So that's a pattern, right, as we're talking about high mortality rates. B, look at one way that the Black Death spread during this time period. I don't have to go to the excerpts, right? I'm free to use anything. And so there's really two answers I can go with. It spread because of the Silk Road, because of trade routes moving east-west, which is certainly true, right? The plague moved down those trade routes. Riding on rats, the fleas went down these trade routes, or we could talk about the expansion of the Mongols through warfare, right? That warfare brought the plague to Europe. And then C, explain one way that the environment or sedentary civilizations impacted the spread. Well, there, again, we've got kind of a split. Probably the best example of the environment impacting the plague, in my mind, I think of the Sahara and how really Africa was spared from the plague because of this giant barrier or shield that was hot, arid desert. And so that maybe saved civilization. Sedentary cities, civilizations in Europe accelerated they hastened the spread of the plague, right? Because small villages, there's not that many people. You don't have the kind of population density. You get to the big cities of Europe and they're filthy. They lacked hygiene and sanitation. Lots of people crammed into small places with probably limited diets. Little ice age had limited calories. And so it's like the perfect situation to spread a disease. A lot of people not socially distanced, filthy, dirty. It's a prime place for either, fleas and rats, or when it eventually goes airborne. Right. Sadly, we know today, without social distancing, this stuff spread very quickly. Okay, so that's it. That's all I would do. Quick, pow, 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 and then I'd start writing. We're going to do a little planning here in a second, but really then what I transition to in my mind is T. Clear answer to the question. I just answer the question directly, provide some evidence to back that up, and then explain it or go deeper. Done. I'm gravy, right? And at this point, if I really do have 2 minutes to do a little planning, sweet. I maybe will go back and highlight a passage, or I'll write down a couple words that I want to use in the margin. So like for A, I know I want to talk about this. B, I want to bring up, trade routes in the Silk Road. And then C, I want to bring up cities being filthy. Done. I mean, I'm ready to rock. That gives me 10 minutes of writing time. So now if I can use T and really be disciplined and spend about a minute on my, less than a minute on my topic, that should go real fast. If I can keep it 3:15 for A, 3:15 for B, 3:15 for C, I'm flying. Okay, so we're going to get inside my mind and do a little brainstorming, a little thinking together. So I put on some relaxing music. All right, so to save time, I've already done the planning part, so you didn't have to listen to me and watch me type, because I'm very slow at doing both. But I did a little quick planning. I timed it out, and the actual planning itself only took me a couple minutes to do. So it's really doable. If it took me 45 minutes to read, it took me a couple minutes here, I'm leaving myself 10 and a half minutes roughly to go ahead and write the short answer. That's plenty of time. That gives me like 3.5 minutes per response. That's a lot. All right, that's good enough, I should say. All right, so for A, what's one pattern? I said high mortality rates. And so my evidence, I just picked the line that I like from each one, because remember it says excerpts. So that means I got to go to the reading. And so the first one, Ibn Khaldun, he said that it caused populations to vanish. Ibn Battuta said 2,000 dead in Damascus. Musis said it killed thousands upon thousands. All those give me the same idea, high mortality rates, okay? So then my analysis would be that the reports corroborate one another, and this notion that people were dying at a rate that was both shocking and harmful to civilization, and this would cause a halt to trade, government, and everyday life and norms. Okay, B, what's one way that the Black Death was spreading at this time? Now, remember, I said you could do military. I chose trade. Military, you could use this third dot, this third bullet point, and that's why I didn't choose it, because I don't want to go and become dependent on the stimuli. It's not a book report. And so I went with trade routes. My evidence was that the Mongols controlled the Silk Road at this time, and it connected northern China to both the Middle East and Eastern Europe. The plague started in northern China, and so it just moves down the trade routes to other places. Shipping routes had carried it from the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, well, specifically the Black Sea, to Europe. And then I just explained that rats carried the fleas. Fleas frequent cities and eventually followed trade caravans from city to city. So my analysis would be that trade routes connect those cities economically, but now also biologically in a pandemic. Merchants moving from one high population area to another then move the disease to prime locations for infection. And then C asked, what is one way that the environment or a sedentary civilization impacted the spread? I went with deserts, and my evidence would be the Sahara. The Sahara is hot and it's arid and dry. Even though trade did continue in trans-Saharan Africa, if there were infected caravans that did have the plague, they would die before they'd ever reach West Africa. And so the ability to spread the disease down into the rest of Africa was near impossible. Europe lost a half. The Middle East lost 15 to 35%. I said 25 to 35%. Africa loses almost nothing. Okay, so they're barely affected. And so my analysis, Europe's losses eventually would lead to higher wages, but a long time to recover. Interconnection had originally helped build prosperous cities and trade and wealth. Now it has hurt by moving disease around. Eventually, that interconnection will help once again help bring about a rebirth, a rebound, as people survive and eventually come out of this Black Death. 100 years later, trade routes will be a reason why Europe comes back. African gold, trade with the East creates more wealth, and so Europe will climb out. And so that's it. Those are my quick little bits of planning. Now, I'm going to write just one response. I'm going to time myself. I'll write it in front of you so that you can kind of see how quick I'd go. I'm going to do T, and then we're done. Let's wrap this baby up. Christmas time. I honestly don't know what that was. I'm sorry. All right. Here we go. There's 3 parts. I'm only going to write A. I'm going to leave B and C for you. I'm not going to do all the heavy lifting, but I'm going to type it out, which again is way slower than if I write it. But I'm going to show you how I would use T to craft a quick response, but try to keep this thing moving. All right. So reminder: A says explain one pattern the excerpts show about the Black Death. So T, topic, direct answer. So here we go. A major pattern witnessed by those living through plague was the high mortality rates inflicted on infected areas. Okay, straight answer, right? It's right to the point. Okay, then I need to go for evidence. All right, so I'm going for evidence next. So I want to bring up these points. I don't need to bring them all up, right? But I do want to try to show that there's this pattern. So according to Ibn Khaldun, the disease caused populations to vanish, and Ibn Battuta recorded 2,000 dead in Damascus. Also, the Italian writer Cease wrote that thousands upon thousands of Mongols died in a day. So that's my evidence, right? So it's pretty uninspiring, but I want to keep my explanation for my analysis. So idea, here we go, evidence, and now my analysis. These unrelated corroborate the idea that infected death tolls that were shockingly high and were having a significant impact on life, on civilization. Trade and government were halted, and cities were left empty or unprotected. It felt apocalyptic to all. Done. Right, there we go. All right, so timing wise, I'll tell you what that was in a second, but if we look at it, pretty straightforward. There's my topic sentence, right? So if I want to map that out, a major pattern witnessed by those living through the plague. What was a pattern? A major pattern was high mortality rate. My evidence, so I went through and there's my evidence. According to Ibn Khaldun, there's my quote. Now, again, this isn't a DBQ. It's a short answer, so I don't have to give citations. I just go with it. So there's my evidence. And then here's my analysis. And this is where I do the work of a historian, and I take it that next step. So these people weren't together. They're unrelated, disconnected, but their ideas corroborate this shockingly high toll. And it does have an impact on civilization. The pattern shows us that trade and government were halted. Cities are really hurt, left empty, unprotected, it would have been a terrible thing. And again, you could go in a different angle. That's up to you. That's where the art of the historian really comes in. But it's that quick, guys. It really does fly if you keep T in mind. And then that's it. I'm moving on. So there's one, and then I'm going to answer B, and I'm going to answer C, and I'm going to keep going. Because remember, even though this went quick, 3 minutes roughly, I'm hoping, I'll tell you in a second, that still leaves only 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and I have 2 more to go. And I really want to get all 3 points because I like these. These are easy cupcake kind of prompts. And so I want to keep running the show here and getting it done. Okay, and so that's how you would do it. Now I'm going to leave the last ones for you to practice and write, and hopefully this was useful. As guys, always feel free to email, chat with me, pop into the Zoom meetings, whatever it takes, but hopefully a nice little window and something you can go back to and revisit, or you could download and save this, whatever you want, a little tutorial on SAQs. All right, take care.